In this video, I will introduce you to a summary of the lecture delivered on September 16, 2024, at the Polish Academy of Sciences Scientific Station in Vienna. Jakub Kłeczek's lecture explores the rediscovery of Oskar Gierke mechanical theater, which played a key role in shaping early visual entertainment, particularly within the Austro-Hungarian region. Here, you'll learn about Gierke's role as a pioneer of visual media in Central Europe, the early medium of mechanical theater, and where it could be found. When was it most popular? Why is it worth revisiting through the lens of media and film history? How can further research on Gierke and mechanical theater shed light on interesting questions related to the early era of the so-called cinema of attractions? Let's begin by traveling back to the late 19th century. On the slide, you can see a postcard showing what could be experienced at fairs in German-speaking countries. By the end of the 19th century, fairs were one of the main entertainment venues in Central Europe, as well as in other parts of the continent. At these fairs, people enjoyed carousels, puppet shows, organized games with prizes, and many other attractions. Among these attractions, we can highlight an innovative visual medium, mechanical theater, which is not widely known today. So, what was this form of entertainment? It was a spectacle where mechanical figures, puppets, and scenic elements moved in programmed sequences, creating dynamic, animated scenes depicting contemporary events. The mechanical theater was known by various names: Mechanische Theater, Welttheater, Theatrum Mundi, or Teatru Mechanik. Each of these names refers to the same spectacle, blending technology and art in a unique fusion of mechanical motion and theatrical narrative. A distinctive feature in 19th century press materials, posters, and programs was the presentation of a series of images and moving figures. A typical program featured sequences of images depicting recent events, such as battles, coronations, and other world news. It also showcased visualizations of places that European citizens could not easily visit, such as the Orient, the North Pole, or colonial regions. One of the most important entrepreneurs involved in mechanical theater in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy was Oskar Gierke, born in 1863. His career coincided with the dynamic development of visual media, and he contributed to popularizing this form of entertainment at fairs across Central Europe. He carried on his father's tradition. Like his father Friedrich, he was a mechanic by trade. Oskar Gierke is an interesting example of someone adapting to visual culture transformations since, at the beginning of the 20th century, he founded one of the first cinemas, Hofkino, in Graz. On the slide, you can see three timelines. The first concerns Friedrich Gierke, Oskar's father, who gradually entered the entertainment industry. His mechanical skills made him well-suited to running mechanical theaters. He began by managing performances for other groups before founding his own mechanical theater. In the 1880s, however, he sold his business, and his son Oskar took over the name and part of the operation. Friedrich spent the last 2 decades of his life building puppets and artificial figures in a specialized workshop. The second timeline shows the period of peak popularity for mechanical theater, spanning from the 1840s to the end of the 19th century. Although this form existed earlier, it reached its height during this time. For example, earlier the Theatrum Mundi shows often favored three-dimensional sculptures and puppets over the flat mechanical figures on tracks that later became standard in mechanical theater. The third timeline illustrates Oskar Gierke media activities from the era of mechanical theater through traveling cinematograph shows, starting in 1897, to his final role managing the permanent cinema Hofkino in Graz. It is important to highlight 2 interesting transitional periods in Oskar's life. The first occurred at the end of the 19th century when he combined cinematic screenings with mechanical theater until a tragic fire in Ljubljana destroyed his theater. After this event, Oskar focused exclusively on cinematography. The second transitional period occurred during his stationary work in Graz, with occasional breaks for traveling cinema shows. From a media history perspective, what is particularly interesting is how Oskar Gierke distributed his moving images, both in mechanical theater and during later cinematograph shows. Unlike the later stages of cinema development, Gierke's distribution did not rely on the automobile or postal systems, which became standard in the 20th century. Instead, Gierke used existing transportation networks. Analysis of old newspapers and other sources shows that Gierke visited the same places with his mechanical theater as he did later with his cinematograph. His routes often coincided with the railway lines in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and surrounding areas. The monarchy was a multicultural and multilingual state, which allowed him to reach a diverse audience without needing to overcome language barriers. Moreover, visual communication was more universal and profitable for an entrepreneur. Interestingly, Gierke did not limit himself to Styria, where he was spent most of his life, but traveled much farther. Shortly after turning 23, this skilled mechanic obtained a license for a traveling show. He primarily traveled on horseback, occasionally using trains. He rented horses from Circus Knee, with which he and his family traveled for over 20 years. His mechanical theater, and later his cinematograph, were presented in a tent seating 320 people with standing room for 100. His tours span the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire, including Bukovina, Romania, and northern Italy. Gierke was subject to the same regulations as other traveling performers, such as bear trainers. For this reason, he was often required to set up on the outskirts of fairs and settlements, as his activities were considered risky due to the high fire hazard. It's important to remember that until 1951, film materials were made from highly flammable celluloid, which imposed strict safety regulations. Everything I've said so far doesn't fully capture the nature of Oskar Gierke performances. His shows are best understood by exploring the Mechanical Theater Program Generator, which can be found on the website tmskd.museum. This project was carried out by the Saxon Museum of Folk Art and the Puppet Theater Collection in Dresden. The reconstruction was curated by Lars Reben and Martin Zaveski between 2020 and 2021. The museum in Dresden likely holds the world's largest collection of mechanical theater artifacts, comprising over 2,400 items, including scenes and figures from the Atrium Mundi. To preserve these valuable historical objects from damage, they are no longer presented in motion. As a result, in collaboration with the University of Applied Sciences in Dresden, a decision was made to digitally reconstruct one of the most important scenes, depicting the Indian residence in Agra and the famous Taj Mahal mausoleum. I encourage you to visit their website and explore the history of this extraordinary medium through their digital reconstructions. The key form of expression in mechanical theater was the moving puppets, which deserve special attention. On the slide, you can see digitized versions of puppets from the Saxon Museum of Folk Art in Dresden, SKD. These puppets, representing both human figures and animals, are captured in dynamic poses, simulating short animations of movement. Operating them required precision and expertise that not every artist could master. Many scenes required the creation of puppets from scratch and the design of their movements, which leads us to view mechanical theater not only as a series of moving images, but as a dynamic system of mechanical visual elements with a high level of technical complexity, demanding the audience's multi-threaded and perspective-based observation. Let's remember that the puppets and scenic elements moved on tracks set at various depths on the stage. As the puppets moved past each other, the viewer could either lose sight of them or follow their movement, influencing the audience's spatial imagination and perception of distance and depth. This mechanism introduced an additional layer of illusion, requiring engagement at the level of spatial perception. On one hand, we might say that the creators of mechanical puppets operated similarly to 19th century animators, who created content for zoetropes, praxinoscopes, and other early animation devices. On the other hand, the creators of mechanical puppets had to not only design the visual concept and the sequence of movement, but also build mechanisms responsible for the smoothness and realism of movement, which was more akin to the work of automaton builders. This synergy of technology and art gave movement in mechanical theater a unique illusory quality that extended beyond mere optics, engaging the mechanics of motion. This technical precision made the moving images exceptional, offering not only a visual, but also a kinetic experience that required advanced planning and engineering. Like other 19th century media, mechanical theater was a space where different forms of entertainment and visual techniques converged. In this theater, influences from various contemporary media were brought together like a lens. On the slide, we see an example of the magic lantern, which was used to project moving images by traveling lanternists. The magic lantern, one of the precursors to the modern projector, allowed for large-scale image projection, creating dynamic presentations that fascinated audiences. Another important aspect was automata, mechanical figures with roots in the 18th century, during the golden age of automatons. This was when notable inventors such as Jacques and Bakkenson created devices that captivated both scientists and the public. Their contributions to the development of mechanics inspired the creators of mechanical theaters to construct increasingly advanced mechanisms. Mechanical theaters also had strong connections with panoramas, another significant 19th century medium. Panoramas were enormous, immersive images that transported viewers to different times and places. They depicted both historical events and exotic landscapes, informing city dwellers about current events. In this way, mechanical theater also served an informational and educational function, similar to panoramas. As mentioned earlier, mechanical theater, as a self-operating technical visual system, remains closest to the medium of the Atrium Mundi, whose structure resembled the forms presented in Gierke's theater. Similarities can also be found in the mechanical theaters of Salzburg or in the Ido Physiken, which explored the theme of perspective-based visual storytelling, creating depth on stage. A distinctive technique in mechanical theater was the use of tracks set at various depths on the stage, reminiscent of Baroque box stage techniques, where moving scenery was a crucial element. The shifting intensity of light and the dramatic play of light and shadow also played an important role in these performances, elements characteristic of the popular 19th century Chinese shadow theaters. This list of media contexts could be expanded significantly by bringing up other visual technologies that developed in Europe from the Renaissance through the 19th century. However, to stay focused on the main topic, let's concentrate on the most relevant related areas. Like other 19th century media, mechanical theater served similar functions, combining elements of narrative, illusion, and visual technology. One of its key features was its ability to create a sense of movement and space, which directly echoed the role of panoramas and Ido Physiken, both of which offered audiences journeys through different times and places, giving the impression of being transported. Similarly, moving scenery in mechanical theater recalls the solutions used in Baroque box stages, where the movement and change of scenery were essential in building the illusion. The influence of automata was also present in the construction of puppets. However, a key difference was that mechanical theater was a more egalitarian medium, unlike automaton shows, which were often more exclusive. Automata, as precursors to mechanical figures in theater, animated performances with meticulously planned movements, much like shadow theaters, where animated figures created dynamic images. Magic lanterns, used for projection and animation, had a similar function in building backgrounds and visual effects in performances. These media, like mechanical theater, were designed not only to entertain, but also to immerse viewers in a world of illusion and new visual experiences. All of these technologies operated at the intersection of art and technology, creating systems that used movement, light, and space to engage audiences in complex spectacles full of multi-layered narratives. Continuing our analysis of media context, let's turn to the future and consider what modern media share similar functions and goals with mechanical theater. Lars Rebin, a researcher and curator of the Mechanical Theater collection in Dresden, suggests an interesting comparison. He argues that mechanical theater can be likened to the newsreels of the early 20th century. This comparison is apt because it highlights the way mechanical theater conveyed the timeliness of events. While this older medium wasn't identical to newsreels, they shared certain common goals and functions, which can help us better understand the media nature of mechanical theater. Mechanical theater served both an entertainment and informational function, engaging audiences with historical and political events. The moving images and mechanical performances often conveyed informational narratives aimed at reinforcing certain values and social attitudes. Performances frequently started with a series of gags, followed by content about social behavior and clear messages interpreting the historical events presented, which we would today call developing news. Mechanical theater also emphasized something we might call the effect of witness and presence. Its mass appeal and documentation were not the primary goals. Instead, it offered viewers participation in the operation of a complex mechanism, building the illusion of co-participation in events. This allowed viewers to feel as though they were witnesses to the story being told. This was a key characteristic that distinguished it from other, more static or documentary forms of visual media. There's a certain paradox here. While mechanical theater clearly tricked the eye by simulating movement and events with mechanical figures and scenery, it also sought to recreate reality in a very accurate, unique way. These apparent contradictions can also be seen in later animated propaganda films, which, despite their unrealistic aesthetics, effectively elicited specific reactions and shaped opinions. One example is Emil Kohl's 1910 animated film La Bataille d'Austerlitz. This film presented a humorous version of the historical Battle of Austerlitz, 1805, where Napoleon's forces defeated the Austro-Russian coalition. Despite the comedic tone, the film referenced key historical events, reinforcing patriotic sentiments. Similarly, mechanical theater had a tangible impact on audience perspectives, even though it portrayed reality in a non-realistic way. In this context, we can observe that in mechanical theater, the precision of the images wasn't as important as the dynamics of movement and the power of the narrative. The movement and interaction between mechanical elements captured the audience's attention, creating an illusion of reality through technical means, enhancing the drama of the performances. Technically and visually, mechanical theater stood out for its ability to simulate complex actions and multi-level interactions between elements of the performance. Audiences were forced to actively follow changing scenes, shifting their attention between details and the overall picture, creating a unique experience. This engaged them on many levels of perception and imagination, making the spectacle not just a performance, but an intellectual challenge. All these elements made mechanical theater a unique medium of its time, combining advanced technology with strong narrative, offering audiences a complex and multi-layered experience, as well as a tool for reinforcing beliefs and values. In closing, let's look once more at the left side of the slide. There is information about a poster announcing an audiovisual experience of the Battle of Austerlitz, 1831. The performance took place on March 24th, 4th, and 25th, 1839, at the Magic Theater, Zauber Theater. The title of the show was The Battle of Austerlitz, or The Poles Against the Russians, and it referred to the events of May 26, 1831. The performance was organized by Johann Friedrich Gottlieb Thiem, active between 1809 and 1840, the owner of the Atrium Mundi. The enemies described in the show were the opponents of the Polish army. The terms enemy battalions and enemy sharpshooters suggest that these were Russian forces, as the description relates to the Battle of Austerlitz during the November uprising, in which Poles fought against Russia. Historically, the enemies of the Polish forces in this battle were the Russians. This document interestingly resonates with the attitude of the Saxons, which can be found in the Leipzig press of the time during the November uprising. An analysis of these press materials indicates that Saxony's stance on the Polish uprising and independence efforts was ambivalent. On one hand, there was sympathy stemming from historical ties with Poland, but on the other, there was political pressure not to antagonize Russia or Prussia, both of which were involved in suppressing Polish independence aspirations. At the same time, voices sympathetic to the Poles in the spirit of Romanticism appeared, which seems to have been a significant element in the reception of such performances. It is possible that audiences interpreted the show as emphasizing the bravery of the Poles in the face of powerful Russian forces, fitting into the romantic ethos of the fight for freedom. While discussing the media characteristics of mechanical theater, a modern researcher may notice various later similarities. However, leaving that aside for a moment, it's difficult to definitively say that the features of mechanical theater have completely disappeared. This is confirmed by the work of Oskar Gierke, who was active in both mechanical theater and early cinematograph shows. Analyzing available press materials, it's evident that Gierke, both in the 1890s and at the turn of the century, sought to familiarize the public with technological innovations designed to attract audiences. In a performance announcement from Olomouc, we read about a show illuminated by Drummond limelight, hydro-oxygen, as well as a series of extremely interesting and spectacular performances in the fields of painting, mechanics, physics, and optics. Gierke specialized in presenting scientific and technological novelties to the public. A local journalist reported on Gierke's show in December 1896, writing, "Mr. Gierke's performances with his cinematograph and giant phonograph were met with great interest and pleased the audience, especially during the well-attended Sunday performances." In addition to the cinematograph, he also presented a giant phonograph. As the cinematograph itself ceased to be a technological novelty, Gierke did not abandon the emphasis on the technological nature of his performances, as confirmed by an announcement from Vienna in 1904. Gierke's famous electrobiograph, Cinematograph, the largest cinematographic enterprise in Austria, with its own electric drive, a machine with 25 horsepower. The impression of technological novelty was a key element of Gierke's advertising strategy. All of this makes it difficult to label Gierke solely as a cinema pioneer in Styria. He was, in fact, part of a much broader spectrum of communication transformations in his time and place. The format of the mechanical theater fair shows, in which he could integrate a variety of expressive forms, perfectly aligned with his fascination for invention, a passion he was able to share with his audience. In Gierke's case, it becomes clear that the process of arriving at the medium of cinema took decades, not years. Sources documenting his cinematograph shows at the turn of the century indicate a lack of a clear-cut media formula for cinema, which was rather an element of a broader entertainment package typical of the mechanical theater. In this framework, the cinematograph became just one component of a larger visual communication system, rather than the dominant medium. Issues such as the method of distribution, traveling attraction shows, building audience expectations through advertising, posters, handbills, newspaper announcements, and the nature of the show, short moving images, seem rooted in the traditional format of mechanical theater. Therefore, in Gierke's case, it's hard to speak of a distinct stage of traveling cinema, as cinema had yet to develop its own established distribution formats or predictable audience expectations. Cinematograph shows were more of a media practice that extended the existing traveling attraction format, presenting various moving images. The period of Oskar Gierke's work raises several key questions. If we accept that institutional cinema with a permanent venue was not the main destiny of the cinematograph, but rather one of many attempts to find a film distribution format, then where might we look for the roots of this evolution? If attraction shows did not fully exhaust cinema's potential, what other solutions could have influenced the development of this form in Central Europe? One possible clue could be the Kaiser panorama, a mechanism for showing stereoscopic images that functioned as a traveling enterprise, presenting photographs in different cities using stereo photography techniques. This system might have influenced later cinema distribution models by adapting certain elements of traveling shows. In the context of Gierke, it's also worth considering the Variate format, which combined various forms of audiovisual entertainment into one performance. Bolter, Grusin, and Ausländer suggest that this format, originating from Variate, found its place in television through diverse programs composed of several segments. From this perspective, we might ponder whether Oskar Gierke should be viewed as more of a pre-television figure than a pre-cinema one, given the variety of his shows. Such speculation not only opens up avenues for research into later stages of visual media development, but also highlights how Gierke's life story can inspire further discoveries that nuance the highly intermediate period at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. Thank you for your attention and for exploring the fascinating world of Oskar Gierke mechanical theater with me. As we have seen, Gierke's work not only documents the transition from mechanical theater to cinematograph, but also opens up broader reflections on the transformations of visual media and their impact on popular culture at that time. His innovative approach to technology and his ability to merge art with science make him a unique figure in the history of visual entertainment. I hope today's session has inspired you to continue researching and exploring the media of the past and their surprising connections to today's audiovisual culture. Thank you once again, and I invite you to further explore this captivating topic.